Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Good morning, Hokie Nation. We got a great show for you here today as the Virginia Tech Hokies get ready to travel on the road down to Tallahassee to take on Florida State, a rematch of the 1999 National Championship. We got the whole football crew on deck. It's episode 317 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it's coming up right now. It's chilly fall weather here in Blacksburg as we record on Thursday, October 5th, 2023 from our Tech Sideline studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and please share the podcast with a friend. As always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Today's episode is also brought to you by Triumph NIL. Triumph NIL is a unique and experienced sports marketing agency specializing in building custom name, image, and likeness partnerships for student athletes. They have built out an amazing content network featuring student athletes and coaches. Visit triumphnil.com to learn more. Subscribe and support Hokies NIL. All right, let's go ahead and introduce our football crew. A little bit different on set today, but a lot of the same faces as always. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, senior staff writer Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, founder and general manager Will Stewart. Producing behind the scenes, it's Mr. Jack Brizendine. And of course, I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Well, fellas, I ask you this right off the top. And Chris, I want to go to you first. Is Florida State not as good this year as they were last year in 2022?
I think, there was a stretch last year where they lost 3 games in a row. And then they started, dedicating themselves to the run a little bit more after that. And then they won 6 in a row to end the season, including their bowl game. I don't think Florida State this year has hit peak Florida State of last year yet. I know they blew out LSU in the first game of the season, but if you look at that game statistically, yards, first downs, all that, it was pretty similar. I don't think they've hit their peak defensively, but I also don't think they've hit their peak offensively because Jordan Travis got hurt against Boston College and has arguably been pretty banged up ever since. So like I said, I don't think that they've hit their peak yet. I think they're capable of playing more consistent football than they've played. And I say that knowing that they're 4-0 overall and 2-0 in the ACC with wins over LSU and Clemson. But yeah, I think they're capable of being more consistent on the ground in the running game, and they're capable of being more consistent defensively as well.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think they might be better than last year just based on who they've beaten. You look at that 6-game winning streak they had at the end of last year: Georgia Tech, Miami, Syracuse. Sorry, Gio.
That's all right.
Louisiana Lafayette, Florida, and then they beat Oklahoma in the bowl game by 3. I don't think any of those teams are as good as LSU and Clemson this year. So you look at the level of competition that they've played, and even that Boston College game where, it ended up being close at the end. They were up 31-10, I think, in that game. I mean, it was a blowout. It was going towards that way. As somebody who might have had a ticket on Florida State's line in that game, I was watching that, not exactly liking the direction that was going. I think this is a really good team. I think it has lapses a little bit where, maybe boredom in the game or something. It just seems like they just okay, we're up really big, and then, kind of let their guard down a little bit. And obviously that wasn't the case against LSU. That was just a wild first half in that game. Then they blew them out in the second half when they really put the hammer down. And Clemson was a fight all the way to the end of that one. But BC, for sure, it felt like they just kind of got bored with that game for a while. So I think this is a good team. I think this is a legit top 5 team. Obviously, I think it'll be the best one that Virginia Tech faces this year.
They wouldn't be the first team to have a flat performance in Chestnut Hill.
No,
No.
electric atmosphere up there. People really get up for the game. So,
How good is Clemson? How big is that win on the road for Florida State to go into Death Valley and take down the Tigers?
I think Clemson has gotten substantially better offensively since the first game of the season. It's better play all the way around. They've actually moved into I think the top 30 in total offense, which you wouldn't have thought if you'd watched their game against Duke when the Blue Devils just hammered them. And now I know Duke's got a good defense. We saw what they did to Notre Dame last week, despite the result. Duke's defense is good, but Clemson shouldn't be scoring 7 points in a game. But they've gotten a lot better since then. So that was a good win on the road for Florida State, even though if it was somewhat fortunate, I guess,
with the
missed field goal.
Missed field goal at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe Dabo can look for a kicker in the transfer portal. That could be the first place he could look in the transfer portal.
Well, and they wouldn't even have been in that spot if they didn't have the scoop and score.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, a lot of things went Florida State's way in that game, but if you look at that and to go into Death Valley like that and win that game, which has been historically such a tough place to play. And I know, we kind of rag on Clemson because they had the start that they had, but they've come back and they've played pretty well going. They beat Syracuse last week. Sorry, Gio, again to bring up another Syracuse loss for you, but they beat Syracuse pretty handily. I mean, they a lot of opportune plays on defense that they scored off of, and it looked like it was just sort of getting right at that moment. So I think Clemson is better than, what are they, 3-2?
They might not lose. Yes, they're 3-2.
Yeah, they're
might
better
not
than their
lose
record
again.
indicates. So going in there and winning that game, which has historically been such a hurdle, I think that's a pretty impressive feat.
No doubt. Were you guys a little surprised? You got the 3:30. You got the ABC slot on Saturday.
Tech keeps getting good TV kickoff times this year, is from a viewing experience. It's only been one noon game so far.
It's crazy.
Or has it been two? No, it's been two. Purdue
Marshall,
and Marshall. But as far as home games go, they're getting two really good slots, and now a 3:30 road game. And Rutgers was 3:30 also, I believe.
Rutgers was a 3:30.
I can't even figure out what the prime slots are anymore, because a couple of years ago, all of a sudden they decided that noon was like a prize
Fox
spot.
does.
Fox. I know, but the ratings suggest that tons of people watch those games.
Yeah,
too.
I think. Look, you can't put all the best games in one time slot. You want to spread out the best games.
I just think a lot of people look at the later in the day, the better the time slot is. Like 8 o'clock starts, not really the prized position there. Like if you're 7 o'clock on ABC or something like that, yes. But if you're 8 o'clock on the ACC network, that's sort of an afterthought spot.
From a viewing standpoint,
especially
it's an
in the
afterthought.
national landscape.
Tech gets that because Tech gets that 8 o'clock home slot on the ACC network a lot. Enter Sandman. There's just not that many places you can go in the ACC that's going to present as good an atmosphere as Lane Stadium. So, if Clemson and Florida State are playing in the afternoon in a nationally televised game, and Virginia Tech's got a home game, and you're the ACC network, you're like, yeah, we'll broadcast Enter Sandman. Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly what happened last week. There weren't many. There was like 4 teams that had a bye last week in the ACC, so there were less ACC games to begin with, and Tech ended up getting that spot, and Hokie Nation showed out, as we talked about. The whiteout was awesome. Place was packed. Brought the energy all night. Well, how about former Memphis head coach, which is obviously where Justin Fuente was at one point, Mike Norvell, 4th season in charge in Tallahassee. They haven't done the big thing and won an ACC championship yet. They look primed to possibly do it this year.
I thought by the end of last season, they were the best team in the ACC. Obviously, they can't go back and replay those 3 games they lost in a row. But I thought by the end of the season that they were better than Clemson. And I've kind of continued that on into this year, and I would be surprised if they didn't win it this year. I mean, they got some tough games still. I mean, Miami looks good this year, and they've still got to play them. I think they've got to play Duke.
I can't remember.
Yeah, but if Duke's quarterback is hurt, they might take a slide here pretty soon. But I think you put Florida State the odds-on favor right now. They've already basically eliminated one of their main competitors in Clemson, who already has 2 ACC losses. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a betting man and you were going to bet on an ACC champion right now, Florida State would have to be your pick.
I think you look at Norvell's time at Florida State and it's sort of a testament to patience. Because there was a stretch there where I'm going, is he going to get Willie Taggarted here?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he's going to survive this thing. And I think he came in, I think his first year was the COVID year. So it was a strange season to begin with. I think they only won 3 games that year.
I think they only played 9.
Yeah,
right?
they had a bunch of cancellations. They had fortunate cancellations for their part because I think Wake Forest was on that. Wake Forest was going to beat them down pretty badly. I think Clemson was another one that they ended up not playing. Was going to get crushed in that one. I don't think they made a bowl his second year either. I think they came up short. So, and then last year when they lose those 3 games early in the season, I think a lot of people looked at it and like, when is this going to turn around?
Well, they beat LSU, remember, to start the season.
Yeah.
They started off like 3-0 or 4-0 and then lost 3
They beat LSU where LSU almost roared back to win it at the end when they block an extra point.
Yeah,
Heck of a game.
Heck of a game.
But it was just, there's a stretch there where you're like, I don't know. Is this going to work out? And people are making the comment like Memphis football coaches, they can't go on to the bigger show and do well. But, you know, he's done incredible work in the transfer portal. I don't know if there's a coach in the country who does it better than Norvell does in terms of plucking it, not only guys that work, but like impact guys that go on to get drafted and be stars for their team as he does. And, you know, offensive line was such an issue down there for a long time. That was a really slow turnaround, but they obviously have that in the right spot now. It took a while to get things rolling, and now that they do have it rolling, they look kind of like the old Florida State.
Florida State, one of those schools that football is better when they're good, right? It's kind of one of those schools. Will, you got something for us in the 4th chair?
Yeah, I just wanted to verify what you guys were saying. 2020, Florida State went 3-6. 2021, they went 5-7 and did not go to a bowl. And you're right, in 2022, they started out 4-0, then lost 3 in a row. So if I'm doing my math correctly in the moment, Norvell was 12-16 at that point. Wow. And they've won 10 games in a row since then.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
wanted to
That's
throw
crazy.
that in
Yeah, that's an impressive turnaround. Who do they lose to?
there. Last year,
The 3 in a row.
Yeah.
Wake Forest, North Carolina State, and Clemson.
Okay, so good opposition.
Yeah. Not
that
bad.
NC State game was a game where the quarterback got hurt, Devin Leary, and they still somehow lost to the backup quarterback.
Right, and that was when Sam Hartman was still at Wake Forest. They were obviously good. Chris, I ask you this. You think that Florida State, and it's really no secret, by far and away the toughest offensive competition that Virginia Tech has faced. I mean, everything they can do, they're so dynamic on the offensive side of the football. Jordan Travis is a Heisman Trophy contender. Tell us about the offense.
It's a low bar, by the way.
It is a low bar. Correct statement, but also a low bar.
Fair.
I think when you look at their balance of their offense, the ability to pass, I mean, Jordan Travis, 61%, 10 touchdowns, one interception, over 1,000 yards in just 4 games. And remember, he's been injured. He got hurt at the end of the first half against Boston College, played that second half banged up. And, you know, we don't know exactly how healthy he was against Clemson. He actually had negative rushing yards in that game, so maybe not. That's not normal for him, so maybe not 100% healthy. So he's a guy, mobile quarterback, which, you know, I know Tech fans like to think it's a Virginia Tech thing, can't defend mobile quarterbacks, but that's a lot of teams. I mean,
They're all tough to handle.
Exactly. I mean, look at what Kyron Drones has done on the ground so far for Virginia Tech against 3 pretty good defenses, and so it's tough for every team to stop mobile quarterbacks. So Tech's going to have to deal with that this week. They got 2 big wide receivers. Johnny Wilson, 6'7", 237. He's a regular Bucky Hodges out there, except they don't list him at tight end. And then you've got Keon Coleman on the other side, 6'4", 215. I mean, those guys are going to present a massive they're going to challenge Tech's wide receiver corners like they have never been challenged before this season. I mean, this isn't going to be the Rutgers wide receivers. These guys are really, really good players. And then in the backfield, you got Trey Benson, and he's off to a slow start last year. And he got off to a slow start last year. Transfer from Oregon, big injury history. They finally started giving him the ball like over the last 5 games of the regular season last year, and this coincides with the beginning of their winning streak. Like he only had 1 game where he had more than 10 carries in the first half of the season. Then in the second half of the season, they started giving it to him between 15 and 20 times every game, and you've just had 100-yard game after 100-yard game. He only finished with 990 yards, but it was like 6.4 yards a carry. I forget the broken tackle stat, but he was 6th in the country in forced missed tackles.
79 missed tackles.
79 forced missed tackles. And he only had the ball for 154 carries. The 5 guys ahead of him all had at least 227 carries. I mean, this guy is a tackle breaking machine. He has great balance, great strength. But again, this year he only has 2 games where he's got over double-digit carries. So I don't know if there's a health issue, if he's a little bit banged up. But you would expect if he's been banged up and Jordan Travis has been banged up, they got those guys nice and healthy during the bye week. So this is probably the healthiest Florida State has been since the season opener coming into this week.
Yeah, there's really no weaknesses on this offense. A couple tight ends, Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, they got in the transfer portal. Those guys are threats as well. I think, like I said before, they've really shorn up that offensive line where that was, just such a weak point of the program and why they couldn't get anything going offensively in the past. It's solid to really good now. I'm not an offensive line expert. I couldn't tell you if they were one of the best in the ACC or not, but the numbers suggest that they're doing pretty well up front. So there's not really a spot where you go, oh, if you can shut this down, then maybe you have a chance against this other part. Like, everything can beat you with this offense. It's really going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and you look at the opponents Tech has faced this year. Old Dominion, strong running game, can't pass. I mean, they almost beat Marshall this past week. They rushed for over 300 yards and averaged 10 yards a carry, but they only passed for like 93 yards and the quarterback threw 3 picks, right? It's a horrible passing game. Then you've got Purdue. Purdue's the only other offense Tech has played this year with a pulse in both the running game and the passing game.
And they kind of stink. Like, they've been just... Other teams have been beating them pretty bad.
Yeah, I know.
Wisconsin beat them badly. I think Illinois did last week. I think that was, or was that the other way around?
Purdue beat Illinois.
Purdue beat Illinois.
But they got stomped by Wisconsin.
Yeah, I saw the Wisconsin game. I was watching that in a bar in Barboursville, West Virginia.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, that was not a close game, and I don't think Wisconsin's like top of the Big Ten.
Right. And then you've got Rutgers. Awful passing game. Just wretched. Good running game.
Yeah. I mean, they barely threw the ball. They have 9 passing attempts that day?
They completed 46 yards passing is what they had, I believe, in that game.
Unbelievable.
And then Marshall, again, strong running game, not particularly effective through the air. Pitt stinks at everything offensively.
So bad that Jerkovic got benched. You see that?
No, did he really?
He got benched. Not only is he not the backup, he's third string now. They're going with Veer as their starter.
Isn't it weird how these 2 quarterbacks in the ACC that got benched this week, they transferred to their current school to be with their former offensive coordinator, where they put up really good numbers previously. And so Brennan Armstrong at NC State is the other one. Put up great numbers at UVA in 2021. Like 65%, 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So now you're back with your old offensive coordinator, benched. And now Jerkovic, same thing. Now, I think there's more to it than both those guys. I mean, I don't see much skill position talent on either one of those teams, and I don't see any offensive line ability at Pitt either. So we'll see how it goes for those teams, but I think they have overall bigger offensive issues than their quarterback. I mean, at NC State, when your starting running back just was like, yeah, I'm not going to play anymore after the first 4 games, I think that shows that you've got issues as a whole.
It proves our theory, like that there's an exception to every rule, with our theory that a great offense coordinator can make a great quarterback. Well, not necessarily the second time around if everything else isn't there.
That's absolutely true. And, it could just be that maybe for whatever reason the stars align for both those guys in those specific years.
It is a very strange fall from grace for both of them, though.
Jerkovic's
had such a strange carer just with injuries, and really only had the one good season at Boston College.
And that was the COVID year.
He got hurt the next year, I think it was.
Yes, it was.
Armstrong was better than Jerkovic.
Armstrong set like ACC records.
Oh yeah,
like he was
a really
incredible
good player
that year, and those receivers, and that just. But it fell apart for him at that school the year after, so that's why it was so strange. I don't think he was playing well this season. I don't know if he was playing poorly enough to get benched.
Yeah,
I don't know if I look at that NC State situation, I go, he's the problem.
I watched the UConn game, and I saw him put a pass in the back of the end zone right there, great throw, and the receiver just couldn't catch it. And I'm not sure. I like MJ Morris. NC State won 8 games last year with 4 different starting quarterbacks, 2 of which were true freshmen. And And both those, I mean, they beat UNC with their fourth string true freshman quarterback. When they beat Tech, it was they brought in MJ Morris, who was their third string true freshman quarterback.
And he's starting this week, right?
He's their new starter. So, like, considering how well those true freshmen played for him last year, I think the only reason they went after Brennan Armstrong was because I was so familiar with him. We're getting off topic.
We are.
Yeah.
We are.
You need your little bell to go off.
I know. We needed the little ding. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll rally it back in. Let's still talk about Trey Benson a little bit more. Chris, I just want to break down some of the numbers here. You had mentioned that he went on a tear at the end of last season. How about this? Georgia Tech, 18 carries, 111 yards. Miami, 15 carries, 128 yards, plus a pair of touchdowns. 18 carries for 163 yards. 9.1 yards per carry against Syracuse. Against Louisiana, it was the only game where he had under 100 and he had 80 yards. And then against Florida, he had 111 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. So he was a monster and a workhorse at the end of last year.
And they won all 5 of those games. The previous 3 games, which was their 3-game losing streak, I think he averaged like 6 carries a game. So he was either banged up or they Raheem Blacksheared him, so to speak. So very important player for them. Again, this year he's just not getting that many carries. He's averaging about 10 a game. You look at Virginia Tech's rush defense this past week, and it was very, very good. But they were also going up against backs who I don't think are as good as the backs they previously faced this year. Certainly, that Pitt offensive line is absolutely awful, and the receivers I don't think are good enough to threaten you on the outside either. And to top it all off, Pitt basically runs the Virginia Tech offense that the Hokies were running pre-Pitt. Just not a lot of imagination there. It's a very easy offense to defend. So it's going to be a lot different this week. I think if you're Florida State and Benson is healthy, you look at that Tech film when they were playing Marshall, when they were playing Rutgers, when they were playing Purdue, and see how they couldn't stop the running backs. And I don't think this is the week for them to say, hey, Trey Benson, here's 10 carries. I think you've got to feed him and establish the run. But at the same time, every time you do that, the ball's not in the hands of Jordan Travis.
Some other good options to go
to. Man, it must be a tough job to be Florida State's offensive coordinator, right? But to me, what I'm really going to be looking for in this game, I think, I'm interested to see exactly how good the Virginia Tech secondary is, because statistically they're one of the best in the country, but they haven't played anybody except for Purdue who can pass the football at all. And Purdue, Purdue didn't go out and dominate in the passing game, but they started off that game with guys running wide open. They totally out-schemed Tech from the start in that game. And, then they closed strong. Purdue did. So Tech they didn't play poorly against Pitt over 4 quarters, but they didn't look like Purdue over 4 quarters, but they didn't look like the number 2 pass defense in the country in that game either. So they're going to be significantly challenged this week. I think we'll have a much better idea of exactly how good the secondary is after this week.
All right. Well, we'll go to you in the 4th chair. I know you got some history for us between Florida State and Virginia Tech.
So I got drafted into the 4th chair role last night at about 10 or 10:30, and I was worried I wasn't going to have anything to talk about, but I'm sorry, I have a lot to talk about.
Hey, let it fly. Your show, man.
So first of all, y'all were ragging on BC's crowd. When Florida State went to BC, that was the red bandana game, and BC's listed attendance was 41,000 in their 44,500 seat stadium. So assuming the listed attendance was anywhere close to actual attendance, it was actually a good crowd for them. And the red bandana crowd does tend to be rowdier, I think, than their usual crowds. And oh, by the way, this was really odd to me. The word bandana, I thought it was spelled like banana with a D stuck in there. Boston College spells it with 2 N's, Bandanna. So, of course, I had to go look that up. The spelling of the word bandana with 2 N's or bandana with 1 N has been a subject of confusion for many people. Both spellings are considered acceptable, but the preferred spelling in American English is with 1 N, while the British English spelling is bandana with 2 N's. I don't know why Boston College goes with the British English spelling of bandana.
You think Boston, of all places, would rebel against the British?
Yeah, that's where it all started, buddy.
Come on now.
Throw the tea in the harbor.
Oh, that is great stuff. So Virginia Tech, and guys, we talked about this on a little TSL Today segment that never aired. Virginia Tech is in sole possession of number 1 in the country in fourth down conversion percentage defense. The Hokie opponents are 0 for 4 on fourth down. Virginia Tech is the only team in the country that has stopped every opponent on every fourth down attempt by their opponents.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. Given that the run defense has been sketchy, I think that's an amazing
Yeah, I would
stat.
not have guessed that.
You
at
had
all.
that quarterback keeper, Hudson Card. They stuffed him. You had the
There's one last week.
Yeah.
I think Jerkovic kept it. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And I think it was Tisdale came in and made a good
You might
play.
be right.
yeah.
And I think Pollard may have blown it up also. So Tech opponents are 0 for 4. Only 9 teams in the country have faced 4 or fewer fourth down attempts. So that's an unusually low number of attempts, and that's part of the reason Tech is number 1 in the country at 0%. The Hokies on offense are 7 of 13 on fourth down, which is number 65 in the country. If you look at fourth down stats, teams convert in general, close to 50% of fourth downs. It's just when you don't get it, it can be a disaster.
That's huge.
Right. So, question for you guys. You pay more attention than I do, so it wouldn't surprise me if you knew this. Florida State is 2-0 in the ACC. Who leads the conference at 3-0 in the ACC?
Oh, my goodness.
Louisville.
Ding, Louisville. I did not know that. I mean,
I know they opened up with Georgia Tech,
And then they beat BC and NC State.
NC State last week.
Yeah.
Louisville's. I think Louisville has a chance to win the ACC.
Ah.
I don't know about their defense, but
They've
their
not-
offense is
They've
good.
not exactly played a world beater
only-
schedule. So
yeah.
far.
I don't disagree.
And they look pretty bad for a half against Georgia Tech. They look really bad for a half against
NC
NC
State.
State.
I know.
So
I know it. I think if there's anybody that Florida State's going to win the ACC. I just think that if Clemson doesn't get to the ACC championship game, the team that'll get there will probably be Louisville.
I'm looking at UNC Miami.
Yeah.
I'm still
I'm really looking
intrigued
at.
by those two teams. I mean, neither
Miami is putting up points.
neither of them have lost yet.
True.
Correct?
No.
They both have really capable offenses. And if you're going to go up against Florida State and beat Florida State, I think you have to be able to score with Florida State.
Thing is, I don't remember who all these teams play this year because there's no Atlantic Coastal Division.
And
So-
that's where I got you. Louisville avoids Clemson and they avoid Florida State. They don't play either.
I think they were the only team to avoid both of them.
Right.
I believe you're right.
So the schedule kind of helps them out there a little bit. But
Yeah.
we'll see how it all
Do they
shakes
play
out.
UNC?
Let's look it up.
Well, it's not a big deal.
yeah.
Will, anything else?
Peter Warwick Jr. is on the Florida State roster to tell you how. I put this in Monday Thoughts to tell you how long ago the 1999 championship game was. Peter Warwick Jr. is a redshirt sophomore at Florida State. Pretty sure he's a walk-on. Everything I've seen refers to him as a walk-on. He transferred from Florida Atlantic. 5'10", 170-pound defensive back. He's only played in one game this year, so don't get the heebie-jeebies that he's on their team. I don't think he may not play and he may not do much.
He doesn't return punts, does he?
That's correct.
Let's hope
That
not.
would be the big concern. A Warwick returning punts.
Yeah. Let's not kick it to that guy.
All right, so I want to ask you guys a few questions. Let's get into the history of the series between Virginia Tech and Florida State. Now, lots of young folks listen to the podcast, and you may not be aware of this, but Florida State does not have a super long history of even having a college football team. Trivia, what year did Florida State first play college football?
1962.
1951.
Yeah, I want to say it was in the 60s. It was a women's college for a while.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think.
Right. Interesting.
1954 was their first year. Now, they played Virginia Tech for the first time the following year in 1955. And these teams these two teams in Florida State's, I think this is their 70th season, if my math is correct. Yes, I believe that is right. They've played 37 times.
They used to be in the Southern Conference together, right?
Yeah, they played a lot.
That Southern Conference was no joke. If you look at some of the names in it back in the day.
It's a lot of SEC schools,
Yeah.
plus a lot of schools that don't even play college football anymore.
Yeah. And Tech and Florida State.
So 37 games they played against each other. How many of those has Virginia Tech won?
37.
They had a real long losing streak that Bobby Bowden was like the white whale for Frank Beamer for a while there. He just could never
get
beat
into
him
that.
at that point.
9?
We'll say 12.
I'm going to go 13.
13. Ding, ding,
Dang,
ding.
that was my initial guess. It was like you were telling me always go with your
I
original
know, whatever
instinct.
comes into your
God.
head first.
I know.
So Virginia Tech is 13, 23, and 1. So from 1955 to 1975, the Hokies went 10, 9, and 1 against Florida State. And the big game in that stretch was, and all the old Hokies love telling you about this one, when in 1964, Florida State came to Virginia Tech, ranked number 10 in the country. And the Hokies beat them 20-11. Florida State went 9, 1, and 1 that year. That was the only game they lost all year.
They had Fred Biletnikoff, right?
That was going to be my trivia question. What famous player played for Florida State? Fred Biletnikoff. So 10, 9, and 1 in the first 20 games, and they played each other almost every year. Then Florida State hired Bobby Bowden. He started in 1976, and the Hokies went 0 and 12. Against Florida State from 1976 through 2005. And while everybody finds that national championship game to be painful, the one that aggravated the living hell out of me was that 2005 ACC championship game.
Remember we drove to that game?
Yeah.
Remember what a long ride it was back? And do you remember what happened the next day?
Tell him, Chris.
You got back into town the next day on Sunday, just in time to turn my TV on to watch Virginia Tech Duke basketball, and Sean Dockery makes the shot.
Right. Extremely painful.
Those were back-to-back days. Because that Florida State team wasn't good. They were 7 and 5.
Well, didn't Tech have like 150 yards in penalties or something like that?
Probably.
They had tons. I just remember lots of personal fouls or unsportsmanlike.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just
Were you here at that
drive.
point, Andy?
I was. I remember watching that game. I was working at the Lynchburg News in Advance.
Okay.
I was covering UVA at that point.
Okay.
So yeah, that was one they let slip. Wasn't that the year that Florida State played Penn State in the Orange Bowl or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's like, Bowden versus Paterno, but they were both like shadows of themselves. It was a very
I don't know.
weird matchup.
Pitt State was 11 and 0 when they played Florida State.
Oh, was it that? Okay, I thought.
Yeah, I would not have guessed that either.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That 2005 Florida State team wasn't good, and that 2005 Virginia Tech team is probably the most talented team Tech's ever put on the field.
Absolutely.
I can see members of the 99 team throwing rocks at me as I say that. that 2005 team was peak Virginia Tech talent, and Florida State went 8 and 5 that year, and yet Tech managed to lose the ACC championship game to them. Now, since 2007, the Hokies are 3 and 2 against Florida State, and Beamer did eventually beat Bowden. Wasn't Bowden their coach in 2007?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of the history of the rivalry. So.
What year was the year where Christian Ponder was hurt and EJ Manuel was the quarterback in the ACC championship? And we won that year, right?
Tech did. That was Jimbo's first year, I think.
Okay.
That is correct.
So
I think
2010, Tyrod was still the quarterback?
Correct. He was ACC Player of the Year that year.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
So I think that is everything that I have on the rivalry.
Well, I have breaking news.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
From Virginia Tech. This is straight from VT News at vt.edu.
Wow.
Media advisory. Taylor Swift is good for the NFL, says Virginia Tech sports media expert. This is breaking news from Virginia Tech that I get. Yeah.
That was it?
Wow, that was it.
No, that's a whole article about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's the sports media expert at Virginia Tech?
Bill
Ross.
Anthony Amy.
Anthony Amy.
Yep.
We spent. I love Anthony Amy. He's him and Bill have to be tied with the best professors, no doubt. But we spent all of last class studying the whole Taylor Swift thing in the NFL.
Apparently, Kelsey's jersey sales have spiked by 400%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had a meeting of the TSL interns, and the two female, Kendall Williams and Morgan Gay, were there, and they talked quite a bit about the whole. Like, I didn't know the Taylor Swift thing was so strong.
Yeah. Morgan's in my class with Professor Amy.
Wow.
She loved the Taylor Swift talk.
Young girls and young women are really into Taylor.
Like, they'll spend like over $1,000, maybe even over $2,000 for like one ticket to a Swift concert.
That's what my sister.
It's like I mean, I spent pretty much that to go to the World Series because it was bucket list. So it's the same thing to them.
So do you remember when Virginia Tech played Nebraska in 2009? We were talking about the game, and I talked about Nebraska wide receiver Taylor Swift.
No kidding.
You remember that verbal faux pas? It was Nate Swift.
Nate Swift.
And like, funny. I don't follow pop culture. I'd probably heard Taylor Swift's name at some point. And you looked at me and you're kind of like, Taylor Swift's a singer. I think you're talking about Nate Swift.
I don't remember that.
As annoying as it may be to, I know Chris isn't an NFL guy as much, but as annoying as it may be to your big football fans who just want to watch the game and don't want to see 17 cutaways to Taylor Swift, which is what they did on Sunday, the NFL's genius because like they know I'm going to watch Sunday Night Football whether they're going to talk about Taylor Swift or not. They already got me hooked. They already got me reeled in and millions of other people. Now they're trying to get this new audience and they're doing it. Yep. You know,
the question is what happens after the downfall,
right?
Because this
they're going to write a song
relationship / publicity stunt. Let's be honest about this whole thing. I mean, just promoting a movie right now. Like, okay, right during the NFL season. It doesn't go well for her exes. they usually become a track somewhere on one of the Era's albums out there. And when the Swifties turn against you, oh man, like it's gonna be rough for Travis Kelce. There's a lot of jerseys being purchased right now. I rue the thought of what's gonna happen to those jerseys after this breakup happens, and it's happening at some point. I don't foresee this being a long-term thing.
Well, that'll be more money.
Good luck to the man in the future and how this whole thing's gonna work out. But they might be NFL fans now and Chiefs fans now, but I think the tide will turn very quickly on this whole thing.
Andy, you know a suspicious amount about Taylor Swift. Are you a Swiftie?
Hey, the music's good. I can't deny it. My daughter loves it. My wife loves it, so I hear a lot of it. But no, it's good music. I like it. Yeah.
There we go. Andy Bitter is a Swiftie, ladies and gentlemen. Will, anything else from you in the fourth chair before we talk about this Florida State defense?
I just wanted to say that in one of those Nebraska games, it was actually Chris, did they play Nebraska at Nebraska in 2008 or 2010?
2008.
Okay. So in 2008, Nate Swift, not Taylor Swift, did return a punt for a touchdown.
That's right. Yep.
Oh, I also forgot to mention the 1964 game where Tech beat Florida State. That was in Miles Stadium. That was the last full season of Miles Stadium. So yeah, all the older Tech fans will get misty-eyed reminiscing about that game. And supposedly at the end of the game, Biletnikoff was so mad that he threw a football up into the stands, and that was a no-no because they were probably like $3 or $4 back then, and that was a lot of money.
You don't even want to bring up the 2018 game?
Yeah, we should.
That was the last time they played.
Right? I watched the highlights to that this
morning.
Top
15 game in Tallahassee.
Yeah. It was such fool's gold in the first game of the season. It was like, oh my gosh, this defense by Bud Foster is incredible. Justin Fuente is the man. They got the right hire, and I think they locked him up to a contract extension shortly before or after that. At some point, shut down this high-octane Willie Taggart offense. And as it turns out,
lethal simplicity.
As it turns out, like that was just like putting the Taggart regime down before it even had a chance to start. Like that was it. Got off to a bad start and only got worse for them. I mean, I've never seen a result. Maybe that one Notre Dame Texas game in the opener. I think Notre Dame won it, and everybody's like, they're back, and it turns out they were both just lousy that season. Like everybody thought, oh my gosh, Virginia Tech is back. They turned the corner here, and it ended up being one of the worst seasons they've had in the last 30.
And that defense ended up being like the worst defense of the Beamer era.
And Florida State couldn't do anything in that game.
No, it was incredible.
I think they fumbled it like 5 or 6 times.
So I have quite a bit to say about that game, actually, because I went to that game, and Florida State was ranked 19th in the country, Willie Taggart's first game, Labor Day night. Tech was ranked 20th in the country, which I forgot, and the Hokies smoked them 24-3.
So it wasn't top 15. My apologies.
No,
I don't know why I thought we were 12.
Yeah, and suddenly I can't remember everything else I wanted to say about that game. There was a kind of a hint of things to come, because remember, Florida State had a really long run that didn't quite go for a touchdown. And every other really long run against Virginia Tech that year did go for a touchdown. So I knew what I meant to say. After that game, Fuente was 20-8 at Virginia Tech. And
everything looked brilliant.
And I remember listening to Sirius XM the next day, and they were talking about, or we read an article, Bud Foster for the College Football Hall of Fame, because he'd come in and shut down that offense.
I think Pete Thamel wrote it, if I remember correctly. I think it was on whatever site. I think it was at ESPN at the time, something like that. But I remember him writing that because I had pointed out previously, like the odd quirk in the Hall of Fame voting that assistant coaches that just can't get in.
Right.
There's just not an entry point for them in that whole thing. So Bud still deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but there's no way for assistant coaches to get there right now.
Yeah.
But not based on that performance.
Correct.
That's not the one that gets him there.
Yeah, that's not the one. There's plenty of others. What I remember is I was really glad that game was on a Monday night because that allowed me to go to a Weezer concert on Saturday. Would not have been able to do without that scheduling.
Very nice. All right, let's talk about this Florida State defense a little bit. Chris, not eye-popping when it comes to some of their numbers, especially in the national picture, but you have to factor in they've played two really good teams in LSU and Clemson in particular.
Obviously, LSU can score with the best of them. I think they're fourth in the country in total offense. Even though they lost this past weekend, it certainly was not because of offense. Yeah. It was like 52-49 or something like that. It was crazy. And then you play Clemson and like I said, Clemson's offense has turned itself around in a big way since the beginning of the season. So they have been challenged in two of their first four games, and one of the other games was at Chestnut Hill, and that's one of those places if you go up there and win, fine. You don't even look at the stats, just win the game, right? I think they're going to end up statistically being better. Their advanced stats on their defense are good because I think that factors in quality of opposition. And so you're looking at, in those numbers, I think they're around 25th or 35th or somewhere in between and like FEI and F plus and things like that. When you factor in the quality of opponents, I think their defense is better than the traditional stats show. I think they've got a lot of good players on that defense, and some of them were highly touted recruits. And then you got a guy like Jared Verse, who's their best defensive lineman, who they got from the transfer portal from Albany, right? And he had 17 tackles for loss and 9 sacks last year. So you can find football players anywhere these days.
He hasn't even really gotten going this year.
He has not.
He has like a half sack or something like that. I mean, this guy had a first-round grade, I think, last year, and he chose to come back.
Right.
So that tells you the talent that he has. So it's just it's like, how long can you plug the dam before he starts having all these plays that he makes out there? I think it's going to happen eventually. I think Tech hopes it's not this week, but looking at the tackle play that the Hokies have had lately, I think there's an opportunity for him certainly this week.
How about some defensive personnel for us, Chris, who really stands out to you, particularly in the secondary?
Fentrell Cypress was at UVA, and he was very, very good for Florida State last year. Renardo Green is another corner who's very good. Jarian Jones, he's their nickel. He's very good. And all three of those guys are redshirt seniors. It's a very experienced defense. I mean, here's their starters. Redshirt junior, redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt sophomore, redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt junior, redshirt sophomore, redshirt senior, redshirt senier. All right.
That goes for the offense as well.
You need to point to the sign every single time.
I'm about to bring up another point. I put this on the boards yesterday. So you look at the two deep on their offense, so they list 13 positions on offense to account for all their personnel groupings. So there's 26 players in the two deep on offense. 24 of the 26 have redshirted, and on defense, I think it was 18 of
19 of 22.
19 of 22.
And one of the guys on offense I'm looking at here, Keon Coleman, is a transfer.
Right.
So they didn't have access to him to redshirt him.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And there's only 3 or 4 true freshmen, and they're too deep. So a lot of people like to say, oh, you can't redshirt these days because highly ranked recruits won't stay and things like that. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of guys here who have redshirted. This is Florida State. They sign top 10 classes every year, and they've redshirted the vast majority of their roster. And
to be fair, half of these guys on here are transfers.
So they redshirted somewhere else. But that just means, the fact that there's only 3 or 4 true freshmen in the two deep this year shows that, you get an older team, they're redshirting a bunch of guys this year. I mean, that's how you want to start that momentum where you can redshirt as much as possible. And if you recruit the right players and buy into what you're saying, you can still do that.
Where, if anywhere, can Virginia Tech exploit this defense on the offensive side of the football with Kyron Drones at quarterback this week?
I think they're a very athletic defense. Obviously, Florida State always is very athletic. You've got to use their athleticism against them. Smoke and mirrors, get them going one direction and throw it back the other way, and things like that. And that's what Tech did such a great job of against Pitt last week. Is in the running game there was so much misdirection, and Brandon Patterson pointed some of this out. Is like the first two plays of the game were the quick tosses, but they were both completely different plays because of how Tech blocked. And the first one that didn't work, they blocked to the left, like everybody moved to the left, and you could key on the offensive lineman, and Florida State knew exactly where it was going. The very next play, same thing, a toss to the left, except this time two offensive linemen pulled from left to right, and you could watch it on film. You could see those linebackers keen on those offensive linemen that were pulling, and the linebackers just stayed in the middle of the field, attacked the line of scrimmage to the left, and that's when they noticed, oh, Tootin's already got the ball and he's going around that side of the field, and he got like a 12-yard gain on that play. Obviously Florida State has a lot of speed, but you have to be deceptive and use their speed against them, and go against their key reads and beat them like that. I mean, you got to be balanced and things like that. And again, you have to lean run heavy offense this week because two reasons. Obviously that's Kyron Drone's strength. Is he needs to play in an offense. Like if you go back in like 2019 season and look at like attempts by Hendon Hooker on a game-by-game basis, he was generally throwing the ball between like 15 and 23 times a game. And even 2020, that one game notoriously where he only threw it 10 times and was like 10 of 10. That's how you have to use Kyron Drones in this one. And also a run-heavy offense keeps their offense off the field, the Florida State offense, assuming you can pick up first downs. And that's key to this game. It's like I would love another game like last week where you have the ball for 37 minutes. Doesn't guarantee victory because Florida State has a lot of explosive athletes. They're going to make explosive plays offensively, but I'd feel better about it if Tech came out of this one with a time of possession advantage.
Yeah, every second Florida State's offense is now on the field is in Virginia Tech's favor in this one. So I would advise them to have as many long drives as they can. Easier said than done, but I would imagine that would be the game plan, is to kind of grind this thing out if they can.
All right, very, very briefly, before we get into some buy, sell, or hold and our final thoughts from Will, I ask anything that stands out on the special teams. Kind of a fluky type kicker, not bad by any means, but not a guaranteed 3 points every time for Florida State.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I don't think he's made one beyond 50 in his career. I think he was 0-3 there last year. He's 4-4 so far this season overall. I want to say last year, the year before, he was only 12 of 20.
Yep, so that's correct.
Yeah. There's some inconsistency there. Now they do have a kickoff returner, and and I forget his name. He should be in my preview if you've got my.
Let's see. They got Keon Coleman as a punt returner.
Yeah, that's kind of strange. So you have a 6'4", 215 pounder as your punt returner.
Yep.
And he's never returned punts before. It makes me wonder if like some of their smaller options maybe just haven't been able to field it cleanly. I mean, that's, James Mitchell.
They got James Mitchell back
nobody
there,
else
basically
can catch it. Let's just put James Mitchell back there.
I was surprised when like Tech had Bashal Tootin back there and like their two running backs returning kicks at the begining of this year.
I might take Bashal Tootin off the kickoff return team.
That's a Stu Holt thing. He likes running backs back there because he thinks they just sort of have that natural. They can see a lane better.
Just hate to see him get hurt like that.
Yeah.
And then Winston Wright Jr., the transfer from West Virginia, slot receiver, he's their kick returner. 2
career kickoff returns for touchdowns. I had a really good career at West Virginia as a receiver. Did not play last year. 2 years ago, 2021, he caught 63 passes. Had a great year. Only one game did he catch fewer than 3 passes, and that was against Virginia Tech. 1 catch for 6 yards in that game, which I find pretty interesting. But he doesn't start for Florida State,
right?
Which is kind of how talented this Florida State team is. I think when a guy like that, who's a good player for West Virginia, like he plays, but he doesn't start.
All right, let's go ahead and play a little bit of buy, sell, or hold here. First,
are you going to gloat from last week? How we got all of these wrong?
I can't gloat at all because I was kind of right there with you guys on a lot of them.
But you set the numbers.
I did set the numbers, and a lot of them weren't even close though. Like Tech surpassed them by such a significant amount. Nobody saw that.
It was such a strange result. And like, if Tech was going to win, I didn't think they'd win like that.
Yes. I will say people in the comments were going for your guys' heads though. They in the comment section they said, Gio, you got to hold these guys accountable this week. So I was like, all right, we got to play buy, sell, or hold again.
I love it when people are like, oh, nice predictions. It's like, if I was right on my predictions all the time, I would not be sitting here. I would be sitting in Las Vegas in a sports book
no
making
doubt.
millions of dollars. So
Absolutely.
listen, this is not a prediction game. We're not experts at that. And even the experts only get like 54% right.
I base my predictions fully off statistical analysis, not emotions.
Totally unrelated, but we just started on our kickoff show for our student journalism stuff. We started a pick against the spread show. We can't call it a betting show, even though we say bets. It's just like, there's rules. And first week we went 4-2-1. Last week we went 5-4. So we're still in the plus in picking games against the spread. We did get Louisville wrong last week, which was tough.
I would have got that one wrong too.
I thought the spread was 3.5. On the road at NC State, but I thought Louisville was going to kill them. They won by 3. Vegas is very, very good. All right, buy, sell, or hold time. So last week, you guys, you got a lot of these wrong. Let's see, 185 yards rushing for Pitt. I think you ended up getting that one right.
A little short of that.
We got about
134.
Yeah.
Tech ran the ball for more than 125. They ran it for 199. Tech threw the ball for more than 175. So, yeah, it's safe to say we weren't that close last week. But this week, it's a new week. We're going to get Will involved in the game as well. First and foremost, Tech scores first in this game.
Ooh, they've done it 2 games in a row. Sell.
Sell.
I'll sell.
All
Offensive disparity between the two.
Understandable.
Heart says buy, brain says sell, so I'm going to sell.
Okay, you can hold as well, but that's no fun. We should just call it buy or sell.
I got a hold on every single one of them.
True.
Never be wrong.
Yeah. At that point, we wouldn't have a game. All right. Tech wins the first quarter.
Sell.
Sell.
We keeping track of these, man. I could be contrarian.
Honestly,
I gotta
we should be, and we're not.
I got to sell that, though, because I think it's reasonable to expect Tech to adjust to a team that's much better than what they've seen. Sometimes you get off to a bad start if you're playing a team that's way better than what you've seen so far.
Right. Tech is within 10 at halftime.
Within 10. Under 10 or it can be right at 10?
We'll say right at 10 or less. The line is 10.
Is it?
We'll call it 10 and a half at half.
Sell.
I'm going to sell. I think Florida State can get up big, and then maybe Tech can kind of get back in it later. But I just think FSU's a better team. They should be up by that much.
Okay.
I'm buying that.
Ooh.
Don't know why. I'm just buying it.
All right. Are you going to the game?
Break the tie.
No.
No, not making the trip. All right. Tech scores 20 or more points in this ball game.
Buy.
I have them right at 20 in my
Me too.
prediction. I'm going to buy.
I think 3 of us picked him to score exactly 20 points.
I think all
It's a
3
nice
of you.
round number.
Yeah.
It works
David's
out
prediction
well.
was 41-17. And I think you guys all said 20 for Tech.
Yeah, Chris and I were 38-20, so I'm buying that. Tech
You were
was-
35-20?
I think I changed it to 36-20.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Tech covers at plus 23.5.
Well, buy. If I picked him at 38-20, then yeah, buy.
Yeah, I'm going to buy. That's a big number. It's
huge
the biggest line as an underdog Virginia Tech's had since it joined the ACC.
That's incredible.
And the other ones have not gone well. They have not covered in those games. I just think with the way Florida State has played defense this year and had a little bit of letdown in some games, and maybe they get up big and they get bored again a little bit. I think there's a chance to get the back door there and get back in it.
I'm also buying that, not just because it's because I picked Florida State to win 38-20, but like Andy said, that's just a big number, so I'm buying that Tech can cover that.
Could be a backdoor cover, but it still counts.
Vegas will take your money.
They do not care about the tenor of the game. They just want the ticket.
Exactly. Well, we're going to take the same numbers from last week. Tech throws the ball for 175 or more.
Buy. I think they'll end up throwing it more this week because they'll be behind.
Yeah, I think it's a comeback mode type thing. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. I like it. Tech runs for 125 or more.
125 or more. Bye.
Wow.
I'll sell that this week,
Okay.
just for kind of the same reasons before.
Okay.
I'm gonna buy that.
You're gonna buy that, okay? I'm like on the fence with that one. I'm kind of with Andy on the sell side, but Drones only throws the ball 18 times in this game, so that kind of
Sell that.
Sell that, okay?
Now, if he does only throw it 18 times, Virginia Tech might pull the upset because that means the running game's going really well.
That's either they're about to upset or he got hurt at some point. It would not be great. I think it's going to be well over 18.
Well over 18 because they're gonna have to.
Yeah.
Ideally, in this offense, you'd only want them to throw it like 20 times, right?
Yeah, something like that. I think it's going to depend on how the game's going, for sure. But I think that's ideal.
So I'm selling because he's going to throw more than 18, right?
Yes.
Okay, sell.
All right. Sounds good. Drones goes turnover free for the first time.
Considering the quality of athletes Florida State has on the field, I would sell, but turnovers can be so random. But he's had at least one in every game so far. So it's one of those things like you keep betting that until something else happens.
Yeah.
Right? You're like you're in Vegas and I'm betting evens. If I hit 6 in a row, I'm going to keep betting until it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're gonna sell. Drones will have a turnover.
Yes.
Okay.
Sell. I think he'll have one. I think he's going to have to throw it a lot. One of those is going to lead to an interception. I think ideally in his situation, don't fumble it this time. He's had 3 straight games with a fumble that have been fairly costly.
Yeah, I'm going to sell that also.
Selling that one. Okay. Jordan Travis looks back to 100% out of the bye week. Now, that's something that's very hard to gauge, but looks like his normal self, normal mobility.
My guess is buy.
Okay.
But without knowing their specific details, I don't know.
Right.
I am not a medical doctor. I'll hold on this one.
Okay, fair.
I'm going to buy. I think he'll look really good.
He'll look really good.
Health-wise.
Okay, all right. Tech holds Keon Coleman to under 60 yards through the air. That is the big target. They're really going to have to key in on him.
Under 60 yards for. I'll go buy, but instead it'll be Johnny Wilson.
Okay.
I'm going to sell. I
You think he'll tear
They
it
gave
up?
up 75 on the first pass play last week. I think there's going to be opportunities there for them to get yards, all the
big play.
receivers.
Okay.
I will sell that also.
Okay. All right. Florida State only throws the ball 21 times. Their lowest this year, they threw it 24 times on the road at Boston College.
Yeah, sell that. That they seem, no matter how good Trey Benson may be, they still seem pretty pass happy down there. Not that I blame them with Jordan Travis, but I would sell.
You think they'll throw it around the yard? Okay.
I'll sell. 21 seems like a low number. I think they'll get there.
What if I moved it to 25? Does that change anybody's thoughts?
That might change it a little bit.
I'd
I
have
think it'll
to-
still be near that number.
Yeah, I think it'd be right around that.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, if Tech could get some pressure and force them into scrambles, then maybe. But I would still sell and think it'd be slightly more.
Okay. Will?
Selling also.
Selling. Okay. Just 3 more here. Florida State, 5 or more plays of 20-plus yards.
Buy.
I'll buy. It's a big play offense.
Yeah, like Pitt, even Pitt, who can do nothing offensively, hit 2 huge plays. Against Tech, and the Hokies have had issues defending big plays this year, even in the game where they played really well overall and won. And you're talking about Florida State athletes, and for once facing a balanced offense. Well, I guess technically speaking, Pitt's offense was balanced.
Equally bad at running and passing the ball.
Equally horrible.
Will, what you got?
Hate it, but I'm buying that.
All right. Tech has 2 or more sacks in this game. Had 4 last week.
2 or more,
Yes.
buy. They'll get a random couple sacks.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I think they'll have enough dropbacks, enough opportunities.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the crowd and buy again.
All right. Well, I already know your answer to this. Tech wins, and nobody's going to pick that.
Yeah, I'm gonna sell that.
I will sell. That'd be a heck of a buy, though. I don't know.
Awesome.
I don't know what the plus odds and the money line is.
I
for
think if you
Virginia
bet
Tech,
that in
but
Vegas, you and depending on how much you bet, you could have a very profitable year.
yeah,
Yeah.
There you go. Will?
Virginia Tech has never beaten a top 5 team on the road. Virginia Tech only has 1 victory all time against an AP top 5 team. Number 2 Miami in 2003. Of course, at home. So I am selling Virginia Tech winning. It's not going to happen.
Well, I hope that you're all wrong again on Saturday. No doubt about it. Will,
There's precedent. It's happened before.
Yeah, it happened last week. Will, anything else from you in the fourth chair before we wrap it up today?
Yeah, so Chris had mentioned he got to talking about red shirting. And Chris, you put that on the message board, and I don't know if you saw a follow-up from VT Lee. He did the research. He looked at the Florida State two deep. And he said 13 out of 22 on offense and 9 out of 22 on defense red-shirted somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's 22 out of 44. 22 transfers in there too deep. And then, Chris always says red-shirting, and VT Lee says always be paying other teams red shirts.
There you go. Hey, look, and again, red shirt, because, if you got to hit the portal one day, you can get a 5th year at a place like Florida State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So this is I put out the call for questions on the message board and got a lot, but this is one that has been asked a lot this week on the boards, and it was specifically asked for the podcast from Matt Hart 96. What needs to happen on Saturday to feel like the Pitt momentum is still alive? Obviously, a win would be a great indicator, but short of a win, which is unexpected, what needs to happen on the field to feel like a moral victory for this team and overall progress?
Yeah, I'm not looking at it so much statistically this week as I am, what do I see Virginia Tech trying to do offensively? Do I sit there and see them just running it between the tackles over and over again like the first 4 games of the season? Like they did quite a bit, and they don't roll drones out very much, and you don't see much deception or smoke and mirrors or whatever. I'll feel like they took a step backwards. I don't know how many yards they're going to put up. I don't know how many points they're going to score. But, I want to see a concerted effort to have variation within the play concepts and play calls and things like that on the offensive side of the ball. So, to me, that would be progress on that side of the ball. Defensively, obviously, I don't think they're going to hold Florida State to 38 rushing yards or whatever it is they held Pitt last week, but look competent, because in the previous 4 games they really did not against the run. I don't know what it would look like statistically, but I think I would know it if I saw it, if I feel better than I did coming out of Marshall game or Rutgers game and things like that. So to me, it's more like eye test than anything else. That said, I don't know that Florida State has played their absolute A game yet this year. I guess they did for the second half against LSU, but they haven't since. It could also be one of those games, if Florida State plays their absolute A game and Virginia Tech does not, then you could get made to look pretty bad, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. As long as you don't let it affect your confidence. But for me, generally, it's the eye test. What do I see Tech trying to do offensively, and do I feel like that they just played better on defense than they did against the run against Marshall and Rutgers, basically?
Yeah, I think I'm with you in the eye test. I think I just want to see competitiveness. I think there's a talent disparity between the two teams, and you can get out-talented, but are you going to get out-efforted out there? Mm-hmm. Things get out of hand, are you going to just fold? Is it going to look like they're just running through you like your Swiss cheese again? I mean, that's happened before, and that's not I'm not putting a statistical benchmark or, if they keep it within 20, that's some sort of victory. I think you can tell when a team is competitive out there. And, like NC State last year, it was a disappointing result, but that was a competitive team that was on the field. There were some other games last year that were not competitive like that. So I think it boils down to that. It's something more of a vibes thing, how you feel coming out of that game. Because I don't think this is going to be a win, but I don't think a loss necessarily means, this is a step in the wrong direction.
Anything else, Will?
Yeah, I got one more I want to ask, but I do want to give this note. So looking back at that 1964 game where Florida State was number 10 in the country, and that was the only game they lost all year. They went 9-1-1. Virginia Tech went 6-4 that year, and Gio, they did lose at Syracuse in Archbold Stadium.
Nice.
24,000 fans.
What year was that?
That was 1964, the year I was born.
What date was that game?
That was Floyd Little's
November
tenure.
14th.
Oh, I bet that was a cold one.
Yeah, probably colder than that 1981 VMI game. All right. So RU Hokie asks, and I think this is a good one to close on. If Virginia Tech beats Florida State, where do you rank this in the history of Virginia Tech football upsets?
Probably, I mean, it would depend on how the season finishes. Obviously,
how good is Florida State? Really?
Yeah, like when Virginia Tech beat Ohio State, which to this point, in my opinion, is number one. Ohio State went on to win the national title.
But Ohio State was ranked number 8 in the country in that game.
They were ranked number 8 in the country, but then they went on. They didn't lose again. They won the national title. And at that point, Tech was 2-0. We did not know that Tech was only going to go 6-6. I think if you would have guessed after that game, nobody would have guessed, yeah, Tech's only going to be a 6-6 team. Like, you're going to go... I mean, Tech went 4-6 after beating Ohio State.
No, I knew it. I said this team's going to go to overtime scoreless against Wake Forest later in the season.
Yeah,
I pegged it right there. I actually called it.
Right. So some of it is like, if you pull this upset, I think as of right now, real time, it would be the biggest upset in Tech history. But maybe you wouldn't feel that way at the end of the season if, like, Florida State ended up losing 3 games and, they don't go on to win the national title like Ohio State did. You could feel differently by the end of the season. But right now, real time, I would say it'd be the biggest upset, certainly of my lifetime in Tech history.
Point spread, it would be. I mean, by far and away, the biggest. And you go back to that Ohio State game. I want to say the line was like 10, 10 and a half. Like, it had gone down because of the quarterback situation. With Ohio State and JT Barrett starting fairly young in his, I think that was his second career start because they played Navy the previous week. This would be a shocking upset, not just, because of the point spread, because of how well Florida State's played. Everybody's saying Florida State is back. They're a top 5 team. And then Virginia Tech, a couple weeks ago has given up 200 plus rushing yards to everybody that they play. I mean, it's just not a program that's in the right place. Had a 9-game losing streak against Power 5 competition up until last week when they beat a pretty bad Pitt team. So I think this would be the upset of upsets in the program history if they were able to pull this off.
Not only that, Florida State's coming off a bye. And sometimes that seems to matter, sometimes it doesn't. But I think in terms of injuries, like if Travis has still been banged up and if Trey Benson was banged up, and that could explain why he wasn't getting that many carries. If those guys are healthy, then this will be the most dynamic, on paper from a health standpoint, the most dynamic offense Florida State has put on the field for a game so far this year.
Plus, I think it just creates some separation from what is a very emotional Clemson game. Normally, if you play them the week after that, maybe you catch them on a letdown because they exerted so much energy, were so happy to beat a rival like that. It's like, okay, they're not going to take the next game seriously. They had a week to get that out of their system, additionally, in addition to getting healthy a little bit.
I think Florida State a little bit fortunate with their scheduling. They get their Chestnut Hill game before the Clemson games. You can have a letdown at Boston College, even at Chestnut Hill, and still win because you out-talent them if you're Florida State, and then you get a bye week right after. It's really, really nice setup.
Well,
I just wanted to add that, hearing Chris talk about that 2014 game against Ohio State, in retrospect, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that's Virginia Tech's greatest win ever in football, given what Ohio State went on to do and what Virginia Tech went on to do.
You'd have to define greatest.
Just a team playing way above their head and beating a team that eventually won the national championship.
I would refute that by saying I think it was the most exciting win in the moment. Tech didn't build off of it, though. Like, Tech built off the 1995 Miami win. They built off the Super Bowl.
I'm talking about a game in isolation, right. I think. You go back and watch that game, and I still remember Todd Blackledge. I remember Michael Brewer throwing off the very back of the end zone, throwing a 30-yard out pattern to Isaiah Ford on the sideline, and Todd Blackledge just going, wow, when the pass was complete. And then you remember that play where Brewer was running from the pocket, and he threw that pass to Sam Rogers, who was in triple coverage on the sideline, and it went into a window this big, and Rogers caught it. There were just a number of phenomenal plays.
I heard Brewer was so injured after the game that, like, once the adrenaline wore off, like, he couldn't carry his bag out of the stadium. Lester Carlin had to carry it for him. That's how banged up he was.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Because they played like that the next week against East Carolina. They were down 21-0 in the first quarter. His
back wasn't right for the rest of the season. I remember, like, the Pitt game that year, they gave him a shot at halftime because he couldn't function. So, like, Tech won that game, that individual game, but what it did physically to Michael Brewer, I actually think playing that game ended up losing them more games down the line because
A
of his
Pyrrhic
health.
victory is what you're saying.
Yes, I think they could have gone like 7-5 maybe if they'd played somebody else, and because he would have just been healthier for the rest of the season. But he said at one point, like, they hit him so hard and he thought he was going to stay down, but then he could hear the players talking trash. They were like, "Oh, we finally got him." Like they were trying to knock him out of the game because they knew he was Tech's only chance to win it. So he was like, when I heard that, I knew I had to get up. But it's one of those things where, like, he did more damage to himself and it hurt Tech in future games.
And then the next season, they have the lead against Ohio State.
Yes. And he was playing great again.
He was playing great, and I think they had that clip of him on the sideline. It was like, they're going to have to hit me a lot harder than that to knock me out or something like that. And then the guy like did the body weight slam on him, and it broke his collarbone. It's like, okay, well, they did finally knock him out of the game.
Oh my God.
And it got ugly after that. But I mean, man, they were competitive for 3 of the 4 quarters.
I think it was still like a 1-score game at the start of the fourth quarter. I think
it was, and then it was Braxton Miller did that spin move on the sideline.
That still comes up.
He hit the circle button or whatever the button is to do it. That was an impressive play.
I'll say this: if Scott Loeffler could game plan every week against Ohio State, he'd be one of the best offensive coordinators of all time.
He really saved it for the Ohio State game. He's truly a Michigan man by doing it that way.
And did you see what his team did? Who's he coaching? Bowling Green.
Bowling Green beat Georgia Tech.
Crushed Georgia Tech this week.
Saw that.
Like, they dropped 38 on
to the point that Georgia Tech reassigned his defensive coordinator.
Wow.
This week.
Wow. So in that 2015 game against Ohio State was number 1. Ohio State got up 14-0 at the end of the first quarter. Tech scored 17 second quarter points to take a 17-14 halftime lead. But Ohio State did go into the fourth quarter up 28-17.
Okay.
On their way to a 42.
So it must have been late third quarter. Yeah. And what I remember is a couple of touchdowns. It was a screen to Sam Rogers, and then there was like a rollout to the right, and then a throwback to Isaiah Ford to like the 3-yard line to set up another score. Smoke and mirrors.
This would be a bigger upset than that if they were to beat Florida State.
Yes.
You guys are hyping this up. I almost wish we were playing the Buckeyes this weekend, but instead we're going to Tallahassee. Last question for you guys. What's coming up this weekend on TSL? Andy's going to be on the road. What's coming up?
Normal stuff for me. You've got some interesting stuff.
I've got something on Kyron Drones today. His half-brother plays for Florida State.
Yes.
He's the right tackle, Jeremiah Byers. I've talked to both of them, talked to their dad. Should be a pretty interesting matchup for the Drones family there. I asked Kevin Drones, their dad, who do you root for in this game? They've got the T-shirts that are, house divided type T-shirts with the helmets of both. He's like, I'm going to root for the offense because his son plays quarterback, his other son plays offensive tackle. So he's going to root for the offense whenever they're on the field. That's a good way to do it.
It's a fair response.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, appreciate you guys. Definitely. Andy, safe travels. We'll see you down there. Enjoy the game back in Blacksburg, and let's do it again on Monday. Hopefully talking about another Hokies win, maybe. All right.
Hopefully. For
Chris Coleman, for Andy Bitter, for Will Stewart, for Jack Brizendine, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. We'll see you on Monday. It's Florida State and Virginia Tech coming up 3:30 on ABC from Tallahassee on Saturday.